Here are 35 online reviews of the audiobook titled, It Ends With Us. Written by Colleen Hoover and narrated by Olivia Song. 1. Heart-wrenching and yet uplifting and instructive. This is the best book I've read from this author. Very different, but a soul-bearing personal journey. Each character is lovingly presented, you can't help but like, even love each one. Some you are torn, as they are between a deep love and painful hatred of their actions. A must-read for anyone who wants to understand domestic violence. Well done. 2. Emotional roller coaster, but in a good way. I never read such a book that had me so emotionally invested. At one point in the book I felt like Lily and Ryle were actually real people, but then I remember there are actually people like Lily and Ryle in real life. It made me stop and think how many people in the world are feeling their same emotions as well. It's more than a book of two people falling in love. It's a book of women/girl family past and how it shaped her life to be in the future. This book also talks about domestic violence, but in a different eye-opening light, bring awareness. I just really loved how the author described the feelings/emotions of the characters. It was as if I was placed in the characters' shoes. 3. Tearjerker. Definitely an eye-opener and for sure a relatable topic. The book describes so many scenarios that women go through and completely depicts the struggle women have with the decisions associated with even the slightest bit of domestic violence. Great book. I absolutely loved this and I believe was meant for me to listen to at a time in my life I have been at a crossroad. 4. Wow, like what the actual fuck? So it's a great story, worth the listen for sure. The educational aspect on homelessness and abuse is very important. The problem with the story is the main character Lily is just a bitch. I hate this character in a lot of ways. Her bravery of starting her own business is so impressive. But she was dishonest and acts like women should be put on a pedestal instead of being equal to men. She caused her husband, who is dealing with extreme trauma, to act the way she did. This character is literally a cunt. As a woman who has been in a situation where real abuse is an issue, I find this story to be insane and very angering. 5. Heartbreaking story, should have trigger warning. First, this should come with a domestic violence trigger warning. This book was recommended to me, via Google search, because I liked the hating game. This book is nothing like that. It's not what I would consider a romance either. It has a good message and may be an important read for some young women, but it does contain very realistic and disturbing accounts of domestic violence, and at times it was unnecessarily and over-the-top tragic for no real added character development. It was well written at parts and the characters were likable, and again it had an important message but was depressing and for me distressing. 6. Blah. From time to time, I like to indulge in non-fantasy etc. stories, but how many of us meet a man that has a successful career, handsome, and be that dream guy whenever? No one. I hate that the author made the story about her family which killed it. She was way too attached to the plot that at times while reading it, it felt immature, premature, on a whim craziness. I won't waste a credit again, I could have written better. 7. Ultimate cringe. I could not continue past the first 1.5 hours as the characters and story were extremely forced, with painfully cringy dialogue in an attempt to be romantic, but missing the mark completely as it was just ridiculously unrealistic. If you loved 50 Shades of Grey you might like this book. 8. Ugh. Lots of inner monologue, pedestrian storytelling, telling not showing. Deeply problematic woman constantly in relationship to romantic love and male gaze. I'd really like to hope female authors write richer female protagonists, just no. 9. How did this book get such high ratings? The book begins as a whirlwind, romantic, fun read until about 1/3 through, and then it becomes solely about the struggles of a physically abusive relationship. I'm not sure how so many people enjoyed this book and left such high ratings. It was so frustrating. It was a challenge to finish 2/3 of it, and I feel like I wasted my time. 10. Hard to read. While based on a true story, it's very hard to read due to all the abuse. There's also the underlying trope of the jerk of a guy with zero redeeming qualities who the woman falls in love with. These stories reinforce the false ideas that if he's mean to you he loves you, and if you just love him enough you can change him, and that is both underestimating women and damaging to how women understand healthy relationships. In short, don't waste your time with this one unless you are looking for frustration. 11. Heart-wrenching and beautifully written. I didn't know what to expect as the book was a recommendation. It gave me a new perspective on domestic violence. Beautifully written and engaging. It pierces your heart but also fills you with hope. I would definitely recommend it. 12. This book hit close to home. My mother was in the same position that Lily was in, and she had my oldest brother and she left him, even though how hard that was for her, and then she met my dad and they will love each other dearly, and I never saw my mom go through abuse with my dad. I saw the hurt when she saw what my oldest brother went through with him. This book is grueling, and please read the trigger warnings before reading. 13. Met. It was predictable. Ryle was the most annoying character ever, there was no discernible romance, and the dialogue was unrealistic. The author has the characters state each other's names a lot, and it's so annoying once you notice. The characters came off as flat. It was an easy, and mildly enjoyable story, and easy to listen to. I'd recommend if you have nothing better to listen to at the moment. 14. Beautiful story and easy listen. I don't normally leave reviews, but I haven't listened to a book in a while where the main character is this likable. I found myself thinking about this book when I wasn't listening to it. The story moved very well and no parts seemed to drag. So happy with this book. 15. Fantastic perspective, a little too much hype. I found it to be a fantastic book. The way it's written gives you a different perspective on a very controversial subject. The only thing I would say is that there is a lot of hype that it doesn't quite live up to, which doesn't take away from the greatness of it but can be a little bit of a letdown. I also wish that Audible books had gender parts read by that gender so it would be more immersive with the story. 16. Worth the read. Part 1 of this book felt naive and very predictable. It reminded me of books I read in adolescence, simply written and obvious what was coming next. The sex scenes also gave me 50 Shades of Grey vibes, which made it hard to take seriously. That said, Part 2 felt much more developed and real. I think Colleen Hoover does a good job of conveying the complexity of abusive relationships. Took me a bit to get into it, but once I got to Part 2, I couldn't stop listening. 17. Amazing story. Wow. Amazing story. I don't know why I decided to buy this book, but I'm so glad I did. I listened without stopping. It's full of love and a great reflection. Thanks to the authors for sharing her thoughts and understanding that there are people who needs this type of message, even if they never had this problem in their lives. 18. If you've lived it, you will understand. This book helped me to understand a little more of what my mother might have gone through in the early years of my life. Her experiences defined who I grew up to be and how much I would shield myself from people like the man who was my father. Now, with daughters of my own, I never want them to diminish their self-worth at the hands of an abusive partner. It was a good lesson of true love, for yourself, and for the innocent children who deserve so much more. Only thing that I didn't like about it was the reference to stomach when speaking of the growing baby inside. A better choice of words might have been more appropriate. Thank you for this good read. 19. Loved this story. I ended up really loving this story. I was worried for a while there that it wasn't going to end the way I'd hoped, without giving any spoilers away, but it ended perfectly and left me feeling so good about each character. I don't agree with the negative reviews that the writing is bad or juvenile. I read/listen to Audible quite often and this was right in line with the genre. Overall it's a roller coaster of a book emotionally and it will leave you thinking on it long after you're done. 20. Not as predictable as you think. Okay, I really enjoyed the start of this one but was uneasy as it moved quickly. Then when Ryle pushes Lily the first time and she makes excuses for him, I knew where it was going. His excuses, gifts, and grabs gestures, who buys an APT without their spouse, screamed oh come on. But the ending was so good, very good. 21. Bittersweet tragic love story. At first I'm thinking this is just the same old cheesy love story/love triangle. Wow is all I can say to what unfolds for Lily and the bittersweet journey she takes. I felt the heartbreak for her. I loved it, and anyone who reads this who's in this situation, maybe it will inspire them to get out. 22. Tough subject told well. I picked this book up not having any idea what it was about. I knew it was on the bestsellers list and it had been on it for a while. I'm not sure I would have chosen it knowing the content, but I'm glad I did. As a historical fiction reader, I needed a break from my usual choices and took a chance with this one. The author weaves the story so well, that you are fully immersed right away. I really liked Lily, the main character, and the way her story unfolds. I appreciated the author's heartfelt note at the end of the book regarding her inspiration for the story. This book handles a tough subject very well. I have already recommended it to others. 23. Oh my, holy cow, WTF. If I was home the entire time I listened to this, I'd be a complete sobbing mess. The story, the way it was written, the narrator, the portrayal. Holy crap! This was so good. One of the best I've read/listened to. I will never stop raving about this book. It gave me so many emotions and I felt them all completely. I cried, got angry, fell in love. 10 5 stars for me. 24. Bestseller list? I'm not sure how this book made it to the NYT bestseller list. Sure, the story is fine but certainly not a must-read. I think the only reason I finished the book was the hope that the language would get better or that the characters would suddenly not be so predictable. Unfortunately, neither of those happened. The plot covers a difficult topic and I applaud the author for trying to take on such a complicated topic. 25. Incredibly moving. I had no idea what to expect with this book. I was thinking this would be a typical love triangle story romance and I was totally unprepared for the gripping and moving story that I read. I loved both of the male leads and I could feel every agonizing heartbreak that Lily felt. I loved Lily most of all. She wasn't perfect but she was amazing. No spoilers, but somewhere in the middle of this book it turns into something completely unexpected and dark and deep. I cried for half the book and definitely cried at the end. I even cried during the author notes. I'm not a crier but wow, this book will do it to you. So good. Off to read all of her books now. 26. Really? After reading the glowing reviews I ordered this book and began to listen. I had to stop to check if I ordered the correct book. Maybe this was for year or squishy romance. The immature angst and drama were utterly ridiculous. Tried listening again and it just got worse. OMG. I do not want to exist in a universe where grown women with half a brain behave this way. The only good thing I can say about this mess is the narrator was doing the best she could with what she had to work with. 27. It was good. This was a good book. I don't regret listening. It had me hooked even. However, I could have had more. The main female character wasn't a deep character. I didn't cry like everyone said I would. I did enjoy her strength and steadfastness, her resolve. I would recommend this book to others to serve as an example of the perfect scenario for advice towards ones who have been abused. But, I didn't find it moving per se. 28. Trigger warning? I get it. This story needs to be told. I appreciate this can bring a light to a dark reality and help people who have never experienced something like this understand why it can happen. But, as someone who has experienced this, I would have appreciated a trigger warning, a heads up, anything. This was hard for me to read and put me into a dark headspace. Just wanted to put that out there for any other DV survivors. Be careful. 29. Every teen must read this. I absolutely believe every teenage girl should read this book. Hoover does an amazing job of showing not only the warning signs of domestic abuse or assault, but she shows the mental change it causes in the victim. It shows that if you follow your gut and your knowledge you can end up happy and in love. Absolutely amazing story. 30. I was really invested, then it turned preachy. Despite being an elderly white male, I identified with Lily, the protagonist, and hated the brutal men in her life. I also kept changing sides about which lover she should keep, so, good job. In the last quarter or so, the story turned preachy, and I was wondering when it was going to end. I hate brutality and stories that prick our consciences like that must be told. But not at the expense of the story, which, unfortunately, happened to this one in late innings. It was a pleasure to listen to Olivia Song read this, though. 31. Monologue-driven narrative with a peachy tone. This book has such a preachy tone. It deters from the story and the message that the author is trying to send. Especially in the second half of the book there are long monologues of philosophy that could have been handled in the narrative that really pull you out of the story. It reads like listening to a long conversation of a person who is trying to make sense of the subject matter rather than a novel. 32. Beautifully painful. I love Colleen Hoover. I've read a few of her other books and always fall in love with her characters. This book was hard to read. I don't say this to imply negativity towards the book. I say this because having been in a physically abusive relationship, I instantly related to Lily. The love versus the pain and hate. It's a very tight rope to walk. With that being said, it opened my eyes to how I'm allowing my current partner mentally and emotionally abuse me. It never clicked compared to the physical violence. But the traits are all still there. From the bottom of my heart, I thank this author beyond words. This book is difficult to read, especially if you can relate to the main character. It's brutally honest while captivating you. I highly recommend this book and many others by this author. Thank you, and bravo. 33. Amateurish Writing. I tried to appreciate this book but finally put it down in disgust. The characters are either false and chirpy or false and angsty but never believable. The coincidences that drive what there is of the thin plot are equally implausible. Had to fast forward through the cringy sex scenes. Had to finally stop listening, couldn't spend any more time with these flat characters. 34. Excessive use of the main character's name. The excessive use of the main character's name Lily is beyond annoying. Even when it is obviously only two people speaking, she is always, and with great theatrical flair, addressed as Lily. It's as if the author had a word quota she was trying to hit by repeating the name Lily as often as possible. The journals to Ellen were creative. I did like the way those were delivered. But seriously, I know when a character is speaking to Lily, you don't have to start every sentence with her name. 35. Don't even question it, just read it. This book has me shook to my core. I loved it so much, that on the weekend when I wasn't commuting, I went and bought the actual book because I had to finish it. This book is beautiful, it's heart-wrenching, and it'll haunt you for weeks after finishing it. I cried so many times reading this book, so I will give you that. It's a book that does need a trigger warning to anyone that has experienced or struggled to read anything domestic violence related because this has a lot of that. But if you can, you should read it. Sometimes I'm just working or doing something random, and I think of this book and I get the feels all over again, and I think that's what makes a book beautiful. It'll last with you for a long time to come. Thank you for watching. Please, do not forget to subscribe, like and share this video. Tune in for more online audiobooks reviews.